Welcome to episode 36 of Accessible Finance, where we demystify personal financial topics and answer your questions so you leave saying, I get it now. I'm Eric Johns.
And I'm Rachel Johns.
Let's dive in. Also, real quick, before we do, I still haven't memorized this. I will never memorize this. I have to read a prompt for the 36th time. I just want everyone to know that.
It's the only thing that changes the number.
I know. It's too hard. There's just too much going on. So
Okay, we'll study
trust
it.
us with your money.
We'll study,
Well, it's funny,
we'll
right?
study it. Study it. All right, Eric. So last time we had talked about retirement. Yes.
Yes.
We talked about just retirement, figuring out ballpark numbers to say, like, am I close? Do I need to make changes now? Like, how can I make sure I'm not in this 70% of people
You're laughing.
who don't have financial wherewithal,
Why do you keep
right?
giggling?
Because those statistics were really alarming.
Okay.
And so we're talking about the very flip side of that coin, right? Which is the
Yes.
FIRE movement.
Yes. Software engineers, they're everywhere.
Yes. I mean, we have all of these like startups that have taken off. You've got people in their 30s and 40s that are making amounts that certainly open up a world of possibilities that
Yep.
the majority of the public never thought possible. It's part of this kind of millennial movement. I think it was first coined in like 1992, actually.
Okay.
But it didn't really catch fire until relatively recently,
Catch
right?
fire, she says.
So I didn't even mean to do it. So the FIRE movement, right, stands for financial independence or financially independent, retired early.
Yep.
So I think it's important for us to talk about how retirement planning factors in here because you're planning for a much longer retirement.
Right.
The numbers you're looking at are going to be front loaded a lot. So it affects how you're looking at your Social Security,
Right.
your retirement plans at work, or independently. And then I'd also like to touch briefly a bit on the difference between the financial independence piece and then the retiring early piece and the fact that they
Got
don't
it.
have to go
Sure.
hand in hand.
Sure.
So where do you want to start?
There's a lot to cover.
Okay, let's start with financial independence, the FI.
Okay.
Okay. So what does the financial independence piece mean and look like to you?
It means you do not have to work.
Okay.
It means you found your figure. Remember last episode? Well, maybe you don't remember, but last episode we talked about the 4% rule, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about how you can generally take your after-tax annual spending, divide it by 0.04, find a lump sum figure that
Mhm.
you need.
Mhm.
Okay. And then we can use that as our ballpark for retirement.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're retiring early, that was for a 30-year time horizon.
Correct.
Okay. That's assuming you're retiring for 30 years and you want to fund your retirement
Right.
for 30 years.
And so
Okay.
typically we
Now we're
try to
gonna be
plan for end of plan being around 90-ish. So we're looking at like 60
right.
being about the age for retirement.
Yep. You're using the 4%.
Our fire crew tend to try to retire between 40 and 50, sometimes 35 and 50,
Right.
depending. So we're looking at a much longer.
Correct. There's a bunch.
Yeah.
You're subject to the market for a lot longer. You're going to be dependent on the market for a lot longer, right? And therefore, we would suggest, and most planners suggest that you plan for a withdrawal rate that is significantly below 4%.
Mhm.
We're talking somewhere in the ballpark of like 2.5 if you're going to be withdrawing in your like 40s or early 50s, maybe 3% in your like mid to late 50s,
Yeah.
right? Like, so you're not looking to go as hard. You also are going to be subject to what's called sequence of returns risk. That is the idea that if I'm required to take my withdrawals because I have no other means of income to fund my
Mhm.
spending habits, and the market is very much down, right? That if I pull that money out, then I have less shares of the stocks
Yeah.
or equities to appreciate over time.
It
And
forces you
now,
to have to
yeah, you're
withdraw
in
during the downtime.
exactly, and
Yeah.
it's kind of rough, right? So if you have down market when you need to pull the money early, it's
Only a
much worse than if
larger.
it goes up first and then down, right? So anyway, that's something to think about. That's something that so there's a lot more granularity in the planning. They
Yeah.
also have a lot more years that you need to plan for.
Yep.
And then we had spoken last time about the like go, no go, and slow go or go.
The
I
different
don't like
phases of
this. But yes,
retirement.
the
Yes.
idea that you will spend more early on in retirement and then less gradually as you go on. And then some people call it the smile too, because you can spend a lot on end of life care at the end. Okay.
Yeah,
So
sure.
sure. But the idea is that your spending will fluctuate in retirement. But when the spending is typically highest in the early years, that's you're gonna have a lot more of those. Okay. So
Correct.
we're saying that 65-year-olds are going to be moving around a lot more than 75-year-olds. What about 45-year-olds?
Exactly.
Those guys are ready to party. Guys
Well,
and gals are
and
ready to go international. Like they can go international 6 times a year and probably not burn
correct.
out.
Particularly if you're looking to be part of the FIRE movement, it's not generally, I want to hurry up and get out of the workforce so I can do nothing. It's I want to get out of the
Although we
workforce.
have heard that.
I mean, it's fair. Well,
There are some that are like,
okay,
I got
it's
some
not.
video games,
I
I'm
was
ready
gonna
to
say,
go.
okay, video games aren't necessarily nothing,
Oh, come on.
nothing,
That's a
but
very good point. Excellent point. I
thank you.
want, if you took away
Um,
nothing else from this episode, take away that video games are
aren't
awesome
that's true.
and a
Depends on the
source
game
of
though.
fulfillment.
It's for our children and Eric. But I do think that, the majority of people who are looking to like grind it out hard in the first,
Hmm.
like, I don't know, 20, 30 years of their like work life are doing so with the end goal of like, I'm going to make it count.
Sure.
Right. So we've heard, participants or people looking to participate in the fire movement wanting to do things like lots of international travel, high end meals,
Oh, yeah.
various
I'm in for that.
really, yeah. He would want to go snowboard everywhere he possibly could. So
Yep.
we're talking expensive activities and hobbies that you want to do at a point
For
in
a
time that your
long
body,
time.
yeah, that your body's able to do it.
Right. So again, where do we start? We start with cash flow. It's incredibly, incredibly important. Not just what are
Always.
you spending on now,
Right.
right? Because maybe like I'm a 38-year-old. If I'm a 38-year-old employed full time, and not looking to go and maybe I can take one snowboarding trip a year. Okay. Maybe my time is limited. My free time is
Yeah.
limited, and you're not really spending as many dollars when you're sitting in your desk at work, right? Or like running financial plans on your computer. You're not
Correct.
spending that much money.
Correct.
But if I don't have those
Mhm.
obligations, right, I can live
Correct.
in Colorado for an entire snowboarding
Mhm.
season, boy, I could really
Yeah.
run up a tab.
I'm not eating my peanut butter and jelly sandwich on my desk.
Right.
I'm gonna go
Yeah, I'm
out.
not bringing lunch to work.
Correct. And I think it's important to note that the like financial independence aspect of the fire movement is not simply limited to, I mean, specifically within the realm of fire, it's definitely about getting that amount to be quite high.
Mm,
But the financial independence piece also plays into the like intentional spending, spending with purpose and intention, just
right.
being aware of and having a firm grasp on where the dollars are going, how they're
Yes.
being spent.
This also typically will require either a significantly above average, I mean, like, like, an exceptional understanding of personal finance.
Yes,
You need to know the like,
the ins
a
and
lot of
outs.
the things.
Yeah.
Like, you need to know what a 72T election is. You need to know what Roth conversions are, right? Like, there are a lot of you need to know what the age limits are for
You're a
withdrawals.
DIYer for the fire
Yes,
movement.
really, you've probably done your homework, and
Yeah.
it's probably something that you don't just usually well, sometimes you do, but you don't usually accidentally stumble into this unless you're just naturally frugal, right? And then
Yeah.
you realize, like, "Wow, I have 4,000,000 in the bank, like, maybe I don't need to work," right? So, like, maybe that happens to you,
Sure.
but probably at some point you're, like, discovering the FIRE movement, and they're gonna have a ton of education
Yep.
and resources on, like, what you should be
Reddit's
thinking
got
about.
an endless amount
Correct,
of
yeah, there's various social
things.
media that you'll be able to consume to find the answers. So, some of the answers that you should be looking to find, right, are what happens to my Social Security?
Mhm.
How is that different from somebody that's looking to retire at 65? Well, one of the things is
Very.
the simple Social Security calculator, right? If you're thinking, okay, you're thinking, I'm going to retire, let's call it 45. I'm going to retire at 45. That means I'm going to have to and I plan on electing Social Security at 67. Okay, so I've got, 22 years to fund
Mhm.
self-fund. So I'm going to take from my brokerage or whatever. I'm going to
Right.
self-fund, and then Social Security is going to kick in. I do want to know what that number is. The Social Security is going to be paying me.
Correct.
All right.
22 years later,
Right.
when I can start
Right.
getting
The
my Social
issue is that
Security.
when you're plugging in your numbers right now, let's assume you're 38, you're going to retire at 45.
Uh-huh.
You're plugging in numbers and you plug in your salary. Social Security quick calculator assumes you're going to make 2.4% more every year.
Yeah.
So that's not even the biggest assumption. It assumes that you're going to keep
Work
working
until
until
then.
your retirement
Yeah.
date. So it assumes that I'm working every year until
Right.
67, and
So,
then my
yeah.
salary increases by
Yep.
2.4% compounded every year
So if
until
I'm
I'm 67.
40 and I'm planning to retire at 45 and I put it in, they're assuming that my salary is going to stay what it is and continue
You're
kind of
going to be
adjusting
paid
with
every year,
inflation
and it's going to be
for
increasing
the
every year.
next, whatever, 27 years, right? Because I'm 40 now.
Correct. Yeah,
But
exactly.
it does not know that for me, I want to say I'm working 5 more years and then put a number 0 for the next 22
Right, and
years.
another key assumption is that they will take your average earnings over 35 years.
Yeah.
If you're not gonna have worked for 35 years, then they're not gonna be able to fill that entire bucket, so your average earnings are gonna be lower because 'cause they're still using 35 as the denominator.
Correct. So you're averaging in the amount you're making for like, let's say it's 35 years, right? So let's say I worked 15 of those. So it's going to take the average of my 15, but then I still have those 20 years of zeros.
Yep,
So I need to average those zeros in as well.
exactly
Mhm.
correct. So that's one thing to consider, right? Social Security is gonna be a little bit different, so you're
Mhm.
gonna have to look at that. You could still use, like, Social Security online calculator, you're just gonna have to put in a bunch of zeros at the end, right?
Yeah.
What the years that you're not planning on working before you retire. Another key consideration, right? Your 401k is going to become a lot more valuable, right? What does that mean? It means you're going to want to give more consideration to keeping funds in a 401k versus a rollover IRA or a traditional IRA. It's typically recommended to roll your 401k into an IRA, right? Like a independent custodian, like Schwab, Vanguard, Fidelity.
And we did a
Why?
podcast on
Because
this as well.
right, we did because and we would typically a majority of the time would
Mhm.
recommend that. This is one of those times where we might not.
So
Okay,
let's discuss why.
why not?
Yeah.
Because for a 401k, if I am 55 and separated from service,
Mhm.
I can start taking money out without paying the 10% penalty. I still have to pay taxes, just like I would in the
Oh,
IRA
right.
withdrawal. These are tax deferred accounts, which means I reduced my taxable income by the
Mhm.
amount that I contributed, right? So I did not pay tax on them at the front end,
Correct.
but now when I pull the money out, I do have to pay tax
Right.
on it, all right?
It's the
So
tax treatment for
for
its
tax deferred
requirements.
accounts. That's how
Right.
it's going to be for 401ks, IRAs, SEPs. Like there are a lot that
Correct.
fall in that, a ton that fall under that umbrella.
Mhm.
Most active retirement plans. Okay. If I, so for 401k, they also have fees. They're going to have more fees or at least non-zero fees, whereas your IRA at like Schwab will have no fees, right? It's just what, and you have access to more investments. So typically we would say probably get out of your 401k.
Yeah. Put
All
it
right.
in an
And just go
IRA.
ahead and put in a rollover IRA and we're good to go. All right. Um,
However,
However,
yeah.
you're now looking to retire early. You
Mhm.
might need this money at
Mhm.
55, and you don't want to pay the 10% penalty that the IRA will impose
If you do.
until 59 and a half.
Right.
So IRA minimum age for withdrawal, 59.5,
Mhm.
59 and a half years old. 401k required minimum age to avoid the 10% penalty,
Yeah.
55.
So by
Okay.
leaving it in the 401k, you have four and a
Four and a
half
half extra
years.
years to use and access the money
Correct.
without that
Penalty
10,
free.
without incurring the 10% penalty.
Yeah. Penalty free. And so that's another huge piece to look at when you're trying to calculate your funds because your current cash flow for the fire movement is huge.
Mhm.
But then trying to look at your cash flow because we know that your retirement funds, your social security, this is the only place that your cash flow is coming from. You are not working at all.
Mm.
Because our, participants in the fire movement typically like there's a subset that'll transition into maybe some part-time stuff, but
Yeah, consulting
overall,
work.
correct. But overall, the fire movement tends very much to lean towards like I busted my butt now. I don't want
So
to
that I
do
don't have to do it ever. I
anywhere.
wanna sit on the sofa and
Correct.
enjoy my life,
Correct.
or travel internationally
You
and
don't
enjoy
want to
my
be
life.
part of those retired people we talked about last week who ended up going back into the
Right, right,
workforce.
right. Definitely not the goal.
So, nailing down those numbers very specifically is going to be really, really, really important.
Another thing to think about, right? Another thing to think about, and this is, do you guys ever talk about anything that's not in the weeds, not in granular personal finance planning? Yeah. And this is one of those situations
Yeah.
where there will be times when this isn't unique to the fire movement, but it's definitely also applicable to the fire movement because you're gonna have a lot more years of retirement
Yeah.
than like a 65-year-old, right? A lot of people derive more fulfillment from their jobs than they perceive
Realize.
themselves to. Does that
Yes.
make sense? So like you might just, oh, well, this 9 to 5 grind, this is terrible. I can't wait to not have to answer to whatever. So maybe firing for you or just
Yeah.
by being financially independent for you might look like, volunteer
Yep.
work, right? Like, or working for nonprofits,
Yes.
engaging with causes that enjoy or support,
Yeah.
or just doing kind of work that you like or
Yeah.
enjoy or might enjoy, right? So the idea is just financially independent doesn't necessarily mean you don't have to do work, but also I guess we would just say be cautious, like a little cautionary tale. It might be careful what you wish for. You may look for you may need
Fulfillment in other
fulfillment.
places. Agreed. And I think that, we've seen this a lot actually in recent years in like education, just as a subsect of it. But we have a lot of retired teachers coming back to substitute or do something like
Yeah.
that because they find fulfillment in interacting with kids. It's what drew them to a notoriously
Yeah.
underpaid profession. But the point in time that they've retired, it becomes like, okay, I love being able to have some flexibility there. But we have some people who will come back part-time or even full-time on staff as substitutes just because that fulfillment piece was missing and you don't
Yeah.
necessarily account for that.
So, right, there's no like there there aren't really very many trial runs that you can take. You can maybe
Yeah,
take an extended vacation or something and start thinking about how you feel on, week 3 or 4,
sure.
but it's still not gonna be exactly the same. But the idea is just try to do
Mhm.
like thought experiments and think about
Correct.
what your retirement days are gonna look like before you just, jump off into the, we're gonna be
Yes.
retired early.
Yes. Now I will say, I think
This is
a
not to say
number
that the movement is not beneficial. It's not going to be a net
no.
positive for you. It's just
What
to say, think about it.
and I think a lot of the people who are in that kind of like fire movement, um, aren't necessarily in love with their jobs, but they're well
Sure.
compensated for it.
Right.
So they're like, I'm just going to dig my heels in. I'm going to do what I want to do.
A lot of people are
You may
working two
retire.
jobs.
Correct.
I don't know if you've seen that, but people are working like especially software engineers that can work from
Mhm.
home. They're working two jobs, making 150K each.
Yes.
So they're breaking in 300K a year,
Yeah.
right? And yeah,
And then they're ready
they're
to go.
working hard to do
Yes.
that. They're
Yes.
juggling both jobs.
When some will postpone, other things in their life, like starting families or having spouses, just to put the
Right.
grind in now. But a lot of times, what'll happen is like that's kind of the type of personnel that tends to be drawn to like professorships or things like that at colleges, where it may be that like you have a class for 2 hours once a week, but it's an opportunity to really share your experience and your expertise with a group of people who really need it. So there are definitely options and things to look at, but I think that sometimes the idea of like I can go snowboarding every day. I'm working on you. I can go snowboarding
Let's
every day
go.
might get old or not be as fulfilling as you.
No, I mean, there is some truth to that, to be
The
honest.
diminishing returns can be
The
very
arts are
fulfilling.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that it's just um by no means meant to sway anyone away from the movement whatsoever.
Right.
Um it's an amazing thing. And I think that, even with us, I think we've seen a lot of
Mhm.
um the post baby boomer populations looking at like, okay, I really care about my quality of life. A lot of us have watched our parents work to the brink of like, okay, maybe you didn't enjoy life as much as you would have wanted to, or
Sure.
maybe you didn't get to spend as much time with your kids or family as you may have wanted to. And so trying to make sure that you're balancing all the things has kind of become something we've all taken
Right.
up.
So now that
um
we've talked about non-quantitative
you're
things,
going right back to weeds.
Roth conversions. Let's go. If we thought we were getting
Okay.
through a whole episode without talk of Roth conversions, Rachel, you're sorely mistaken.
Every episode you can bring it up, you will.
It's great.
It
So
is.
it is actually applicable here.
Yeah.
Why? Because early retirees, we said they can't really withdraw until 55 from their 401ks.
Correct.
They
So
can't
what are
really
you
withdraw from
doing?
59 and a half till 59 and a half from their
So what
IRAs, their traditional enrolled
correct.
IRAs.
They're not
So what can we
getting
do?
income. Right. What do they do for 20 years?
So we say Roth contributions. If you've contributed to a Roth, you can always take out the contributions, penalty tax and penalty free. You can also do what's called a Roth conversion ladder. What that means is every time you do a Roth conversion, there's a 5-year clock
Mhm,
before you can withdraw the amount that you converted. You still could not withdraw the earnings on the conversion until 59 and a half or another
mhm,
required, you have to check the box of the Roth IRA things. It's like death, disability, purchase of a first home, things like that. If we're not checking one of those boxes that waives the 10% penalty, right? One of them is 59 and a half,
yeah.
then it has to be a contribution or a conversion after 5 years. Does this make sense?
Okay.
Kind of.
So let's talk hypothetically.
Okay. So hypothetically, I am employed, right?
Okay.
Gainfully employed.
Beautiful.
And then I decide that I want to fire. All right. I have a ton of dollars in my 401k. Let's assume I have a million in my 401k. I've been deferring the max every year, and my
Yeah.
company gives me a ton too because I'm a software tech company or I work at Shell or somewhere
They
that
care about keeping
matches
you.
an insane amount of money. Some of these companies match 10% plus of your
That's
salary every year. It's
wild.
kind of nice. Um, mine's not.
Mine does not either.
Yeah,
Okay. So how old do you want to be right now?
40. Let's say I'm
Okay.
40.
You're
I
40, you have a
separate
million in your IRA.
million in my IRA.
Okay.
Okay. I then Well, I'm sorry,
Well,
it was
it's
a million in my
401k.
401k.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I leave that company.
Right.
Maybe I'm gonna go work at another software company for 5 years.
Okay.
Okay, so I retire from company A, no
Separation from
longer employed.
service. Beautiful.
So that 401k, I can convert to
To
an
an
IRA,
IRA.
all right? And then what I can do is I can convert, let's say I need 100 grand a year to live on, all right? I need 100 grand. I can do a Roth conversion for $100,000 every year. Um, so I take $100,000 out of my IRA and I
Mhm,
convert it to a Roth IRA,
mhm,
but I do it 100,000 every year
mhm.
so that
So you can do it
while
for the next 10 years.
yes, so
Okay.
that over the years 45 through 50, really I could do it, yeah, every year
So,
for 10 years. And
okay.
then now
So
I'm
then
covering
I'm
45 to
40.
55.
I'm 40. I have gone ahead. I've converted $100,000 into a Roth.
Yep.
So now my 401k has 900,000. My Roth has 100,000, right?
Yes.
Okay. Then when I'm 41, I do it again. When I'm 42, so I do it every year.
Yep.
At age 45, The 100,000 I put in when I was
First
40.
year is now good to go.
So my
It's clear.
100,000 is no longer 100,000. It's now 100. What's reasonable?
Or 10, I don't know.
Okay, it's 110,000. I cannot take out 110,000.
Nope.
I can take out my 100,000 I put in.
Yep.
My 10,000, since it was accrued,
It's earned. Yeah, yeah.
earned,
That's
right.
earnings on the money. On the
I have to
conversion.
wait for my retirement age.
Yep.
Right. But my 100,000 I can now take out.
Right.
Question.
Yes.
What if when I'm 40, I decide to put in all 1 million?
You could do that. Well, the reason not to do that
Correct.
is that you will be paying an egregious tax bill.
Yeah.
Your tax bill will be absolutely enormous. You'll be in the 37% bracket. So we're trying to remember at all points in time,
Right.
and that, in our planning, we're trying to pay the lowest tax rate over our lifetime.
Hmm.
We don't want our taxes paid to look like with huge peaks and
Yeah.
valleys. We want it to be stable, preferably in like the 22, 24 brackets.
Correct. So, like when I'm doing my
'Cause-
Roth conversion, like
Mhm.
my $100,000 that I'm rolling
Yeah.
from my IRA into my Roth, I
Yep.
think it's important then to speak briefly to what the tax treatment is. So that,
It's going to be taxed as ordinary income.
right.
You are adding $100,000 each year that you convert, assuming you converted $100,000 to your ordinary income.
Yeah, it's realized it. Exactly.
Yeah, so you're going to be paying tax on that plus the salary that you're earning in this
Correct.
example because we're working for another software company.
Correct. And the
So
reason is because we're moving it from a tax deferred account into a tax-free
tax-free account,
account.
exactly.
So if you're moving
But
all
it's
1
a
million,
way to access money in an IRA,
correct,
essentially avoid that penalty, and then you do still enjoy the
while
earnings
being
that are
able
going
to
to
do it
grow tax-free.
earlier. Like,
Right.
I mean, because again, you are needing to fund 20 years of
Yep.
of income without getting income. So
Right.
it's definitely a good
So
point.
it is a consideration. So those of you that are fortunate enough to be in the position where you're looking to fire,
Yeah,
those are some considerations for you.
correct. And there are many more to be had that are unique to various situations.
Right.
If you were to have,
It's not a one size fits all,
correct,
think about it.
and if you
And
have
we're not even saying that
questions,
Roth conversion ladders are always the way to go. They're an option. They're a
it's
tool.
an
You're going to
important
need
tool to
it
look
is
at.
an important it is
Yeah,
you need to know about the tools that are going to be in your tool belt. There's also
correct.
72T elections. We don't really want to get into that because it's typically not a great option, but
Mhm.
it is an option. That's where you can take equal payments over time from your IRA. You just have to do it for a minimum of, I want to say it's either 5 years from the time you start or 59 and a half. But you also or until age 59 and a half. So if I start taking it at 40, I have to take equal payments for until I'm 59, until it's 59 and a half. I can't
Mhm.
stop at 45 if I decide oh, I no longer need this.
Like I'm
So
good.
that's
It's just
why,
you're stuck in it.
yeah, you're stuck in it and it's very rigid. So if you start it and then you mess it up in any way or you forget to take it, the IRS does not like that and the penalties are substantial.
Yeah.
So you probably don't want to
If
do
you're
that.
not
There's
that,
also, yeah, you can also, I mean,
you're
there are a
probably
number.
not thinking about that when you're in the Swiss Alps doing the
Right,
thing,
right, right,
right?
right. Right. So essentially, you want to know all the tools in your tool belt. You want to have a very detailed plan and a very solid grasp of A, your options, and then B, what you're planning on doing. How are you funding your spending between the early fire years and then when your sometimes pension, sometimes Social
Yep.
Security kicks in?
Kicks in, yeah.
Right. So you're not going to really have any help. There's no backstop that you would typically have if you're 65 and and you retire and start collecting Social Security immediately,
Correct.
or even if you're 65 and you defer till 70, that's 5 years. If you're 40, right, and you're deferring till 65,
Yep.
you got 25 years to play your own game.
Correct.
So make sure you've planned well.
Right.
Nobody's coming in to help you there.
Yeah. This is not a whimsical movement, and it's nothing that
Yeah,
we can
and you need to
just,
account for the fact that some of your money is locked
right.
behind penalties.
Without a doubt.
Right. So
And
your
so you
401k
may,
is locked until
exactly.
55 and your IRA is locked until 59
And
and
you're
a half.
not, exactly. And you become far more susceptible to inflation and market adjustments that are happening
Correct.
there because that's where your money is parked.
All retirees are subject to inflation. You just have longer to deal with it.
Correct. And then you certainly don't want to be typically if you're really putting in that time, the energy in the front end, you don't want to be that 55-year-old who's going through the Starbucks training program to
Right.
some of
No,
them
I
may
don't think
not
that's
man.
anybody's aspiration when they're in their
Sure.
early fire stages.
But how unfortunate to find yourself in that position if
Not
you
fun.
missed your math slightly.
Right.
So typically, it's very, the people who are aware of and engaging in the fire movement tend to be very above average in their financial wherewithal and
Right.
knowledge.
Right. Right.
But having a thought partner or somebody to discuss this with, to say, this is what I'm thinking. Does this make sense?
Yeah. Check my
Is
plan.
correct.
Probably worth the dollars.
Absolutely. So there are lots of financial planners who are happy to work with individuals like that,
Mhm.
whether it's, working with you for a year to make sure that everything that you have is set up. Some will do one-time plans,
Right.
whatever the case might be,
Yeah, it's worth exploring.
to avoid the Starbucks
Yeah,
training
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Don't make mistakes.
No, no, not here for sure.
No. All right, guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, please review the show. And
Mhm.
if you have any topics you'd like discussed or financial problems you'd like solved, reach out to us at podcast@equilibriumfp.com or visit our website at equilibriumfp.com.
Yeah. Until next time.
Thanks, guys.